It's incredible to me that it appears to be that the Democrats are so angry about President Trump's success. He's been so successful on so many levels and has done things so fast that now the Democrats are boycotting. Some of them are boycotting the State of the Union. Adam Schiff, Mr. Russia collusion himself, said he's not going to show up to the State of the Union tomorrow night, Congressman. We'll be watching that one.
Something just exploded in Washington hours before Trump's State of the Union address that has the White House in full damage control and Republican leadership publicly melting down on every camera they can find. A boycott that started as a whisper became a roar, and the number just keeps climbing. 70 members of Congress, 70 elected representatives of the American people refusing to sit in that chamber tonight and lend legitimacy to what they are calling an authoritarian performance wrapped in the trappings of democratic tradition. And the panic coming from the other side tells you everything about how badly this is landing. Make sure you're subscribed to The John Brown Show, because what I'm about to walk you through is not just a story about empty seats in the House chamber tonight. This is a story about a resistance movement that has grown so large and so fast that Fox News, Newsmax, and the Speaker of the House are all simultaneously losing their composure trying to contain the fallout. Here is where this started. A handful of Democratic members announced they would skip the State of the Union. The reaction from MAGA media was immediate dismissal. 10, 20, 30 members. No big deal. Fringe protest. Won't amount to anything. They said it repeatedly on air with the confidence of people who genuinely believed the boycott would fizzle before it reached any meaningful scale. Then it hit 40, then 50, then 60, then 70. And the dismissal transformed into a full-scale freakout happening in real time across every right-wing media outlet in the country. Share this video because the specific things Republican officials said when confronted with that number reveal exactly how rattled the administration actually is. Mike Johnson called a press conference. The Speaker of the House of Representatives called a press conference to address a boycott. Think about what that decision tells you. When 70 members of Congress announce they are not attending an event, the Speaker does not typically call a press conference to complain about it unless the political damage being done is severe enough to demand a public response. Johnson called it shameful. He said Republicans never do this. He said the constituents of every boycotting member are being disenfranchised. He was so agitated about it that he gave the same complaint to multiple separate cameras in multiple separate interviews throughout the day. CBS, his own press conference, cable news hits, shameful, shameful, shameful. The word became a mantra because the administration had no other response to offer. When 70 members of the opposing party refuse to attend your flagship annual address, and the only comeback you have is a vocabulary word, the political reality is not going in your direction. Think about what Johnson's claim that Republicans never boycott actually means in practice. Republicans never boycotted Democratic State of the Union addresses because, for most of recent history, Republicans did not feel the kind of institutional alarm that produces mass boycott decisions. What is happening tonight is not normal political opposition. It is 70 elected officials making a collective judgment that lending the visual of their presence to this administration normalizes something they believe should not be normalized. That is a statement about the nature of this moment that no amount of press conference complaints can erase. Make sure you're subscribed because the People's State of the Union happening simultaneously is the story that is driving Republican panic more than the boycott itself. The alternative event that Democratic members and progressive organizations built as a parallel platform has grown into something that MAGA media cannot stop covering, even though covering it only amplifies it. Fox News brought on contributors to attack it. Newsmax dedicated segments to complaining about its size. Every mention on right-wing media is free advertising for an event that is drawing the exact audience that Republican strategists need to be worried about heading into November 2026. When your political opponents build an alternative platform and your response is to spend hours of your own airtime explaining why that platform is terrible and shameful and unprecedented, you have made a fundamental strategic error. You have told your own audience that this alternative event is significant enough to be threatened by. You have told undecided viewers that something worth watching is happening over there. You have done the promotional work that the organizers could not have paid for. Share this video because what the boycotting members are actually doing with their evening tells a far more powerful story than empty chairs in the House chamber. The members who chose not to attend are not sitting at home. They are bringing constituents whose lives have been directly affected by this administration's policies. A congresswoman from Arizona brought a constituent named Sonia, whose family member is currently detained in an ICE facility despite having leukemia. This detainee has been denied the medical care she needs. She has been vomiting blood. She has lost significant weight. She has been held for over a year while her health deteriorates behind detention center walls. That constituent's story will be told tonight at the People's State of the Union while Trump delivers his address to a chamber that Fox News is framing as a moment of national unity. That is the contrast that matters. A president claiming national prosperity and economic triumph, while a woman with leukemia vomits blood in an immigration detention center and her family sits with a member of Congress explaining what is actually happening in this country. Think about the political power of that contrast and why Republican operatives are so desperate to change the subject to process arguments about decorum and attendance protocols. Make sure you're subscribed because the Epstein dimension of tonight's State of the Union is something mainstream media is almost entirely ignoring. Democratic members who are attending the address are bringing Epstein survivors as their guests. Those survivors will be visible in the chamber wearing teal scarves representing sexual assault awareness and the butterfly pin that symbolizes a victim who took her own life after going public with her experiences. That visual will exist inside the chamber tonight while the president delivers his address. And the members who chose the boycott gave some of their own guest tickets to additional Epstein survivors, so that even their absence is filled with the presence of people whose stories demand accountability. Republican leaders calling the boycott shameful have not addressed why Epstein survivors are attending the State of the Union as the guests of Democratic members. They have not explained why accountability for Epstein's network remains entirely absent from any administration agenda item. They have not responded to the FBI interviews that documented serious allegations. The only response available to them is to talk about decorum and empty seats and disenfranchised constituents. Share this video because the corporate media response to tonight's events reveals a third category of failure that compounds the political picture. Several network anchors were given the privilege of a White House lunch before the address, off-the-record access, a preview of what Trump planned to say, and they emerged from that lunch to go on their broadcasts and relay exactly what the president told them he was going to claim. The economy is booming. The best 3 years in American economic history are coming. Iran wants a deal. Everything is working. No scrutiny of whether those claims are accurate. No examination of whether the economic data supports the boom narrative. No questions about the gap between what the president says and what 68% of Americans report feeling in their financial lives. Just direct relay of presidential messaging dressed in the language of journalism. The president said. The president told us. The president previewed. Meanwhile, 70 members of Congress are boycotting that same president's address because they believe normalizing this administration through the rituals of democratic governance does active harm to the institutions those rituals are supposed to protect. Two completely different assessments of the same political reality. And the corporate news access model produces coverage that serves one of those assessments over the other. Think about what it means that Rick Scott brought a Canadian commentator who advocates for Canada becoming the 51st state as his guest tonight. While Democratic members bring leukemia patients being denied care in detention facilities and survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's network. The guest lists alone tell the story of what each party believes this moment is actually about. Make sure you're subscribed because the DNC chair's response when asked about the boycott captures exactly the right political instinct for this moment. When pressed by Fox News about whether Democrats should show up or stay away, the DNC chair said he respects whatever decision members make. He acknowledged that sitting through 2 hours of presidential claims that contradict lived economic reality for millions of Americans is not something every member needs to subject themselves to. He did not attack the boycott. He did not defend it in overly defensive terms. He simply affirmed that members of Congress are adults who can assess their own obligations and make their own decisions. That is the correct posture because the boycott is not the story. The conditions that produce the boycott are the story. 70 members do not simultaneously decide to skip the State of the Union because they are petty or weak or jealous, as Newsmax contributors claimed. 70 members make that decision because they have looked at what this administration has done over the past year and concluded that the normal rituals of democratic governance should not be extended to conduct they believe violates democratic governance itself. Share this video because the approval rating numbers heading into this address make the panic about the boycott even more understandable from the administration's perspective. Trump is delivering this State of the Union carrying 60% disapproval, 47 points underwater with independent voters, the lowest approval rating of either of his two terms, the lowest any president has carried into a State of the Union address this century. A president at those numbers desperately needs the visual of a packed chamber and the ritual of bipartisan institutional participation to project normalcy and authority. 70 empty seats do not provide that visual. 70 members at an alternative event with Epstein survivors and detained leukemia patients and constituents who cannot afford health care do not provide that visual. The ritual gets disrupted, the normalcy projection fails, and the cameras that would have shown a Congress assembled in respectful attention instead show gaps and absences that every viewer will notice and interpret. That is why Mike Johnson called it shameful in 4 separate interviews. That is why Fox News spent hours covering an event they claimed was insignificant. That is why Newsmax brought on congresswomen to explain why decorum requires attendance at presidential addresses. When the empty seats threaten the visual that a struggling president most needs, the people protecting that president call in every favor they have to change the subject. The boycott is not the story, but the boycott reveals the story. And tonight, 70 members of Congress made sure the country could see it clearly. This story is just getting started. Stay tuned.